I woke up with a searing pain in my chest, only to discover my son had done something unforgivable. But what my daughter-in-law whispered next chilled me to the bone. A punch in the dead of night broke my ribs. But it's my daughter-in-law's secret that keeps me awake. Dare to hear the rest? My son landed me in hospital, but his wife's chilling words, "Keep quiet," made me question everything. What's the truth? It was a stormy night in Bristol, rain hammering the tin roof of our modest terraced house in St. George. The air was thick with the damp smell of wet wood and rain seeping through the cracked window. It was nearly midnight, and I was sprawled on our threadbare sofa, waiting for a call, a text, or just the sound of the front door as my son, James, returned home. Today was my 60th birthday. He'd promised to be back early, but the hour was late, and the bottle of lemonade on the coffee table sat untouched. The roar of a motorbike cut through the rain, followed by unsteady footsteps. James stumbled in, reeking of beer, his shirt crumpled and his eyes bloodshot, not from tears, but from the drink. "Mum, why are you still up?" he mumbled, his words slurring as he tried to keep his balance. I forced a smile, hiding my disappointment. "Waiting for you. Love, it's my birthday. Thought you'd remember." James didn't reply. He lurched forward, arms outstretched as if to hug me, but he lost his footing. His fist swung wildly, catching me square in the chest. The pain was sharp, like a knife. I collapsed onto the sofa, struggling to breathe. "Mum, you all right?" James slurred, panic creeping into his drunken haze. I tried to catch my breath, but each inhale felt like a blade slicing my ribs. Something was wrong. Clara, James's wife, appeared from the bedroom, her long hair disheveled, her eyes cold as steel. She glanced at me, then at James, saying nothing. I expected her to fuss, to call an ambulance, but instead, she leaned close and whispered, "Mum, keep quiet. Don't make a fuss." Her voice wasn't concerned, it was a warning. My heart raced, not just from the pain, but from the icy dread creeping up my spine. Keep quiet. Why? I tried to stand, but the pain made my head spin. My mind reeled, but I heard Clara murmur to James, "Get her to bed. Don't let anyone know." James nodded, too drunk to question her. They helped me to my room, but one thought echoed in my mind. Why does she want me to stay silent? What's happening in my own home? The next morning, I secretly called Dr. Thomas, an old friend, to check on me. His face was grim as he examined me. "Mary, your ribs cracked. You need an X-ray to be sure, but something's not right here." I nodded, wincing with every breath. His next words hit hard. "James isn't the violent type. Could this be more than an accident?" His eyes held a flicker of doubt. I thought of Clara's whisper, and a dark suspicion took root. I pulled my wedding ring from my pocket, a keepsake I always carried to remember my late husband, who passed when James was a boy. I'd raised him alone, pouring my youth into giving him a future. But now, clutching the ring, I wondered, do I really know my son, or the daughter-in-law I once treated like my own? So, the story begins here. What do you think my son's hiding, and why does his wife want me silent? Before you get too cozy, take a moment to like and subscribe to this channel, but only if you're ready to uncover the truth behind this mess. As I prepared to head for an X-ray, a text from an unknown number flashed on my phone. "Don't tell the doctor anything. It'll only get worse." Who sent it? And what are they hiding? The rain had stopped, but the air in our little St. George house remained damp and heavy. I sat at the old oak dining table, clutching a family photo frame, my heart aching. The picture was from 10 years ago, James, a lanky teenager, grinning beside me. My husband was long gone, leaving me to raise James alone, and this photo was one of the few relics of happier times. I brushed my finger over the glass, dust clinging to my skin, a reminder of how time had slipped away. The pain in my chest lingered, but Clara's chilling words from last night, "Keep quiet," cut deeper than my broken ribs. I stood carefully, wincing as the pain flared. The house was eerily quiet, save for the ticking of the wall clock. James and Clara had left early, claiming work. But I wasn't so sure. Since Clara joined our family, things had shifted. She was charming, always smiling. But I'd begun to notice her smile never reached her eyes. Was I too trusting, or just getting old and paranoid? I dug out an old photo album, one I rarely touched because it stirred memories of the hard years raising James alone. Today, I needed something to anchor me, to remind me of the sweet boy who'd bring me a cuppa after school. I flipped through pages James as a lad, holding my hand at the Bristol market, or beaming with his first place ribbon from an art contest. but I paused at a newer photo, James and Clara's wedding. Clara stood close, her arm tight around him, but her eyes weren't on the camera. They were fixed on a man in the corner of the frame, someone I didn't recognize. Unease coiled in my gut. I set the frame down, breathing slowly to ease the pain. Then I heard whispers from James and Clara's bedroom. The door was ajar, and I crept closer, feeling like a thief in my own home. Clara's voice came into focus, low and sharp. "You need to tell your mom. If she keeps poking around, it'll ruin everything." James replied, exhausted Clara. "I'm done arguing. Mom won't find out. As long as you're careful." "Find out what?" "Careful about what?" I froze, gripping the door frame, holding my breath to stay silent. Back at the table, my heart pounded. The wedding photo stared back at me. I snapped a picture of the stranger in the corner, planning to ask Dr. Thomas if he knew him. But then the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Evans, my neighbor, who often popped by with homemade scones. "Mary, you look pale as a ghost. Everything all right?" she asked, concern in her eyes. I almost told her about last night, but the mystery text flashed in my mind, "Don't tell the doctor." I forced a smile, mumbling about a bad back. Mrs. Evans sat down, placing a basket of scones on the table. "Mary, I'll be honest, Clara's not as sweet as she seems. I saw her with some bloke, not James, at the cafe down the road." My heart skipped. Was it the man from the photo? I wanted to press her, but she stood, saying she had to start dinner. As she left, she added, "Watch your back. Mary, don't get blindsided in your own home." I stared at the photo again, then out the window. The clouds hung low, mirroring my thoughts. I'd given up my youth to raise James, working long hours at the factory to pay for his uni. Now, I was doubting the son I loved most. Had I been wrong to let Clara into our lives? Or had James changed, no longer needing his old mom? As I prepared to call Dr. Thomas, my phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number. "Stop digging. Old lady, some things you don't want to know. Who's trying to silence me? And why are they so afraid of the truth?" The pain in my chest refused to ease, each deep breath feeling like a vice tightening around my ribs. Our little house in St. George was unnervingly quiet today, only the creak of the ceiling fan counting the seconds. I sat on the wooden chair, clutching my late husband's wedding ring, the last tether to happier days. But now, it felt less like comfort and more like a reminder of the trust slipping away from my son. James, that text from last night haunted me. Stop digging. Old lady, who sent it? And why were they so desperate to keep me in the dark? I stared at the wedding photo on the table. Clara's gaze locked on that stranger in the corner. Who was he? A man in a gray suit, eyes averted. Mrs. Evans' words echoed Clara with some bloke at the cafe. Was it him? And did James know? I couldn't just sit here, letting doubt eat me alive. I rang Dr. Thomas, keeping my voice steady. "Tom, you free this afternoon? I need an x-ray." He agreed, but his tone was hesitant. "Mary, about last night, tell me everything. This doesn't feel right." I promised to explain in person, knowing I wasn't ready to spill it all, not when Clara and James were hiding something. As I got ready to leave, Clara appeared from the bedroom, dressed in a sharp white blouse, hair neatly tied back, like she was off to something important. "Where you off to?" "Mom," she asked, her voice soft but her eyes sharp as knives. "Just the doctor," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Back's playing up." Clara smiled, but it sent a shiver down my spine. "Take care." "Mom, wouldn't want you taking another tumble." "Poor James. He's so worried about you." Her words sounded kind, but they carried a hidden warning. Did she know where I was going? Or was I reading too much into it? On the way to the hospital, I couldn't stop thinking about James. He used to be my sweet boy, bringing me tea after a late shift. But since marrying Clara, he'd changed, distant, always out, brushing off my questions. Had Clara done something to him? Or had I missed something in my own son? Dr. Thomas met me at the hospital, his face graver than usual. After the x-ray, he pulled me into a quiet room. "Mary, you've got 2 cracked ribs. That punch, it wasn't an accident. The force was too strong for a drunken stumble." My blood ran cold. James couldn't have meant it. Could he? "What do you think of Clara?" I asked, my voice trembling. He shook his head. "I don't know, but I've heard whispers she's mixed up in some dodgy business. Be careful." On my way home, I stopped by the cafe Mrs. Evans mentioned, where Clara had been seen with that stranger. I ordered a black coffee and sat in a corner, watching the door. No Clara, no mystery man. As I was about to leave, a young waiter slipped a note onto my table. "Someone left this for you," he said, then hurried off. I unfolded it, my hands shaking. Don't trust anyone in your house. My heart pounded. Who was playing this game? And why did they keep warning me off? Back home, James was in the living room, staring at his phone, head bowed. Clara was nowhere in sight. James, tell me the truth, I said, my voice quivering with pain and suspicion. Did you mean to hit me that night? He looked up, eyes wide. Mom, I was drunk. I don't remember. Why would you think that? But his gaze darted away, and I knew he was hiding something. I clutched the note in my pocket. Its words, "Don't trust anyone," burning in my mind. As I prepared to press James further, Clara walked in, a small suitcase in hand. "Mum, we need to talk," she said, her voice cold as ice. "What's she planning? And why the suitcase?" The living room felt stifling. Despite the open windows letting in Bristol's damp breeze, Clara stood there, gripping the handle of a small suitcase, her eyes boring into me. "Mum, we need to talk," she repeated, her voice heavy with unspoken pressure. James sat nearby, head bowed, silent as if bracing for a storm. The pain in my chest flared with every move, but it was the suffocating sense of being trapped in my own home that hurt more. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "What's there to talk about?" "Clara, what else do you want me to keep quiet about?" My voice trembled but held firm. Clara smiled that chilling smile that made my skin crawl. "You're misunderstanding." "Mum, I just want what's best for the family. You're hurt, and James and I are worried." But her eyes weren't worried. They were calculating, probing to see how far I'd gone in unraveling the truth. Before I could respond, James shot to his feet. "Mum, I'm sorry about that night. I was drunk. I didn't mean it. But please, stop assuming the worst. It's exhausting." His tone was pleading, but I could tell he was shielding Clara. I wanted to trust my son, but the note in my pocket, "Don't trust anyone in your house," burned against my skin. I held back, not out of fear, but because I needed more time to piece things together. Clara set the suitcase down and pulled out a box of pills. "Take these, Mum. The doctor said they'll help with the pain." I eyed the box unfamiliar, not prescribed by Dr. Thomas. "Thanks, but I'll manage," I said, pushing it away. Clara's brow furrowed, but she didn't press. Turning to James, she said, "I'm off on a work trip this afternoon. Stay with Mum. Make sure she doesn't wander off." Her words were soft, but they felt like an order. James nodded, as he always did. Once Clara left, I knew I couldn't sit idle. I needed someone outside this tangled mess. I thought of Mrs. Evans, the neighbor who'd warned me about Clara, pretending to pop out for medicine. I headed to her house at the end of the street. The warm smell of baking scones greeted me as she opened the door, her eyes instantly concerned. "Mary, you look dreadful. What's happened now?" I told her about the punch, Clara's whisper, and the mysterious text. Mrs. Evans listened, peeling baking paper, her fingers trembling slightly. "Mary, I'll be straight. Clara's trouble. I saw her with that bloke at the cafe, not just once. He didn't look like a businessman, more like trouble. I overheard her talking about the property and needing to hurry up." Property. My mind flashed to the plot of land in Somerset. The last thing my husband left for James. Was Clara after it? "Mrs. Evans went on, check your paperwork. Mary, if Clara's up to something, she'll have left a trail." I nodded, feeling like I'd found an unexpected ally. Mrs. Evans wasn't just a neighbor. She'd seen me raise James, knew what this family meant to me. I trusted she wouldn't steer me wrong. Back home, I searched for answers. I knew James and Clara kept documents in a metal box under their bed. Guilt gnawed at me for snooping behind my son's back, but I had no choice. The pain in my chest slowed me down, sweat beading on my forehead. I found the box, but it was locked. James once mentioned the code was their wedding date, but I wasn't sure. My hands shook as I tried a few combinations, to no avail. Then I heard the motorbike outside. James was back. I scrambled to hide the box, my heart racing. James walked in, eyes red as if he'd been crying. "Mum, we need to talk," he said, his voice trembling. "I know you're suspicious of Clara, but please, don't make a scene. She's trying to protect me." Protect him. From what? I wanted to ask, but his pained expression stopped me. Was I misjudging Clara? Or was she pulling James's strings? As I opened my mouth to question him, my phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number. "That box isn't for you to touch." How did they know I'd tried to open it? And what's waiting for me inside? The house was dark, though it was only mid-afternoon, with storm clouds smothering Bristol's sky. I sat across from James, his eyes red and frantic. "Mum, Please, stop digging, he pleaded, his voice breaking. I wanted to believe him, to trust the son I'd raised. But the latest text, that box, isn't for you to touch, cut through my faith like a blade. Who was watching me? And how did they know I'd tampered with the box? I took a deep breath, the pain in my ribs a sharp reminder to act. James, tell me the truth, I said, fighting to stay calm. What's Clara hiding? What's in that box under your bed? He shook his head, gripping the table's edge. Mom, it's nothing, just our personal papers. You're overthinking this. But his eyes wouldn't meet mine, and I knew he was lying. For the first time, I felt a wall between us, thicker than any Bristol storm. I didn't push further, not because I was giving up, but because I needed to be smarter. If Clara and James were hiding something, I'd find it myself. I left the house, claiming I needed medicine, but headed to the cafe Mrs. Evans mentioned. The place was tucked on a corner, its windows fogged with condensation, the air heavy with roasted coffee. I took a quiet table, pretending to read the paper while scanning the crowd. I hoped to spot Clara or the man from the wedding photo. After an hour, I saw him, the man in the gray suit, hurrying in with a leather briefcase. He sat in a corner, typing furiously on a laptop. I discreetly snapped a photo, zooming in on his face, gaunt, deep-set eyes, a small scar on his chin. I texted it to Mrs. Evans. Know this bloke? She replied quickly. Seen him with Clara a few times. Be careful. Mary, he's into property deals. Property. My thoughts raced back to the Somerset land, my husband's last gift to James. I followed the man when he left, keeping my distance. He stopped at a small office a few streets away, the sign reading Thrive Properties Lute. I noted the address, planning to dig deeper. On my way home, I stopped by Mrs. Evans's. She was wrapping scones, the scent of butter and sugar, a stark contrast to my churning thoughts. Mary, word is Thrive Properties is eyeing rural plots. Clara might be trying to sell your land behind your back, she said, her voice laced with worry. It felt like a weight settled on my chest, heavier than the pain in my ribs. Back home, Clara was back, her suitcase still in the corner. She was cooking in the kitchen, the smell of stew filling the air. But the house felt like a storm was brewing. Back already. Mom, I made shepherd's pie, fancy some, she called, her tone too cheerful. I nodded, but my mind was on the box. I had to open it, no matter what. That night, when James and Clara were asleep, I crept into their room. The pain slowed me, sweat soaking my shirt. I retrieved the box and tried the wedding date again, entering it carefully. Click, the lock sprang open. Inside was a stack of papers, but on top was a contract for the sale of the Somerset land, signed by James, the buyer. Thrive Properties Ltd. My blood ran cold. What was Clara doing with our family's land? And had James truly agreed to this? As I reached for more papers, I heard footsteps behind me. Clara stood there, her eyes icy. Mom, what are you doing? She asked, her voice sharp as a blade. Had she caught me with the box? And what would happen now that I'd seen the contract? The neon bulb in the living room flickered, casting Clara's shadow across the wall like a looming specter. Mom, what are you doing? She asked again, her voice cold but with a faint tremor, as if she was hiding panic. I stood frozen, the land sale contract clutched in my hand, my heart pounding so hard it drowned out the pain in my ribs. The open metal box on the floor was undeniable evidence. I couldn't back down now. I'll ask you first, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. This land in Somerset, my husband's legacy. Why is there a contract to sell it to Thrive Properties? What are you and James doing behind my back? Clara's eyes narrowed. But she didn't answer immediately. She stepped forward, slow and deliberate, like a cat stalking prey, then sat, crossing her arms. You're mistaken. Mum, it's just a draft. James wanted to invest, but we haven't decided anything. Her words were smooth, but her gaze flickered away before I could press her. James appeared at the bedroom door, hair mussed, eyes bleary. Mum, Clara, what's all this noise? He saw the box, then me, and his face paled. Why'd you open that? Mum. His voice shook not with anger, but fear. I held up the contract, fighting to stay calm. James, you signed this, didn't you? You're selling the land without telling me. He opened his mouth but said nothing, glancing at Clara as if begging for rescue. The air in the house was thick, like before a thunderstorm. I suggested we sit at the dining table to talk it out. The faint smell of stew lingered, but no one cared about dinner. I laid the contract on the table, a line drawn between me and my children. James, I raised you alone, poured my life into keeping that land for you. How could you do this? My voice cracked. James stared at his hands, knuckles white. Mom, I didn't want this. Clara said it was the best way to secure our future. Clara cut in, her tone sharp. Don't blame James. Mom, that land's worth nothing just sitting there. We're doing what's best for the family. I searched her eyes for sincerity but found only a cold wall. Best for the family. Or for you and Thrive Properties. I shot back. Clara froze, then regained her composure. If you don't trust us, we'll tear up the contract. But I didn't believe her, not after the texts, not after seeing her with that man from the wedding photo. I turned to James, hoping for honesty. James, look at me. Did you want to sell the land? Or is Clara pushing you? He looked up, eyes brimming, but shook his head. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm with Clara. Please don't make this harder. His words were a knife, slicing through the bond we'd shared. I stood, pain flaring in my chest, but I didn't care. If you're choosing Clara, I'll find the truth myself, I said, my voice trembling. Clara smirked, almost daring me. Be careful. Mom, the truth isn't always what you think. Her words felt like a threat, and I knew I was stepping into a dangerous game. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the sofa, clutching my husband's ring, longing for the days when our family was whole. But now, James had chosen Clara, and I felt like a stranger in my own home. I texted Mrs. Evans about the contract and our confrontation. She replied instantly, Mary. I'll dig into Thrive Properties. But watch yourself. Clara's not to be underestimated. The next morning, Dr. Thomas called. Mary, I've heard Thrive Properties is dodgy, buying up land cheap and flipping it for profit. Clara might be in on it. Before I could ask more, I heard James's motorbike outside. Clara walked in, a thick envelope in hand. Mom, you should see this, she said, her voice calm but her eyes calculating. I opened the envelope, and inside was another contract not for the land, but something tied to me directly. My name was on it, and its contents chilled me. What's Clara scheming, and why did James go along with it? The faint morning light filtered through the curtains, illuminating the envelope Clara had placed on the table. My hands trembled as I opened it, each movement sending a sharp pain through my ribs, a reminder of that night. Inside wasn't another land sale contract, but a power of attorney document, naming me and granting Clara control over all my assets, including the Somerset land. My signature was missing, but what froze my blood was a photocopy of my ID, crisp and clear. How did Clara get this? And why was James letting this happen? I looked up at Clara. She leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, her expression calm but piercing. Mom, this is just a precaution, she said smoothly. If you're unwell, we need to look after you. Her voice dripped with false sweetness. I folded the document, steadying my voice. Clara, where'd you get my ID? And why wasn't I consulted? She shrugged, her smile tightening. James is worried about you. We just want to make sure everything's sorted. James sat in the corner, silent as a ghost. I turned to him, my voice breaking. James, you knew about this, didn't you? You let Claire do this behind my back. He looked up, eyes red, but hesitated. Mom, I just want what's best for us. He mumbled weakly. His words cut deeper, shattering what little trust remained. I stood, clutching the envelope, and left the room. I needed space to think, to understand what was happening. Outside on the porch, the damp earth after last night's rain reminded me of the Somerset land, where my husband once planted an apple tree, calling it James's legacy. I rubbed the worn surface of my wedding ring, seeking strength from my late husband. I'd given my youth to raise James, slaving at the factory to fund his education. Now I stood here, doubting the son I loved most. What was Clara doing with that land? And why was James under her spell? I texted Mrs. Evans, found a power of attorney. Clara wants control of my assets. Know anything about Thrive Properties? She called back, her voice urgent. Mary, I've heard Thrive is under investigation for forging documents to snatch up land. The boss is a bloke named Tony. Scar on his chin. Scar on the chin. The man from the wedding photo. The one at the cafe. Was Clara working with him to steal my land? But why was James complicit? I decided to revisit Thrive Properties' office. I needed proof to confront Clara and James. On the way, I stopped at Dr. Thomas's clinic, the air sharp with antiseptic. Found anything? Mary, he asked, concern etched on his face. I told him about the power of attorney and my suspicions about Thrive. He shook his head. I've heard Tony's not just in property. He's tied to loan sharks. If Clara's involved, be cautious. James might be in over his head. His words struck me. Was James being coerced? I reached Thrive's office at noon, the sun harsh, sweat soaking my clothes. Through the frosted glass, I saw Tony inside, talking to someone. I stayed back, watching. Then I realized the other person wasn't Clara, it was Mrs. Evans. My heart stopped. Mrs. Evans, my supposed ally, was here with Tony. I snapped a shaky photo through the glass, nearly dropping my phone. Back home, James was in the living room, nursing a coffee, eyes vacant. I wanted to tell him about Mrs. Evans, but held back. If she was involved, who could I trust? I looked at James, desperate to ask everything, but only managed. James, do you ever think about your dad? He looked up, tears welling. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't want things to turn out like this. Before I could press further, my phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number, Mrs. Evans isn't your friend. Don't trust her. Who's playing this game? And if Mrs. Evans is part of the plot, what truth lies ahead? The air in our St. George house was heavier than ever. Though the windows were wide open and the ceiling fan whirred steadily, I stood before James, clutching my phone. The latest text, Mrs. Evans isn't your friend, weighing like a stone in my chest. James sat there, eyes brimming. But I wasn't sure I could trust him anymore. Mrs. Evans, who I thought was my ally, was at Thrive Properties with Tony. Clara was scheming to seize my assets. And James, my own son, seemed caught between loyalty and manipulation. James, tell me the truth, I said, my voice trembling with pain and betrayal. You know what Clara's doing, don't you? The power of attorney, the land. Tony, what's going on? He gripped the table, head bowed, silent for too long. Mom, I didn't mean for this. Clara said it was the only way to clear my debts. I owe money, Mom. A lot. I froze. Debts. He'd never mentioned this. Oh, who? How much? Why didn't you tell me? I pressed, struggling to stay calm. He shook his head, voice breaking. I didn't want you to worry. Clara said she'd handle it, but I didn't know it'd go this far. The front door swung open, and Clara walked in, a bag of groceries from the market in hand. She glanced at us, her eyes assessing. What's got you two so tense? She asked, her tone light but guarded. I held up my phone, unable to hold back. Clara, explain this. The power of attorney, what's it for? Where'd you get my ID? And who's Tony at Thrive Properties? She set the bag down, sitting across from me. Mom, you're jumping to conclusions. I'm just helping James. He owes money to some dangerous people, and that documents to protect you, so they don't come after you. Her words were slick, but I wasn't buying it. Protect me. By forging papers, by selling my husband's land. I snapped, sliding the envelope toward her. Clara didn't flinch, but her hands tightened. Mom, if we don't pay, they'll hurt us all. Do you want James in danger? Her words targeted my love for my son, but I saw through her deflection. Enough, I said, standing. Clara, you think I'm too old to see through you. I'm going to Tony, and I'll hear the truth from him. Clara jumped up, her voice rising. Mom, don't. You'll make things worse. But I didn't stop. I grabbed my wedding ring, clutching it like a talisman, and headed for the door. James called after me, Mom, please don't go. I'm begging you. But I kept walking. This was the point of no return. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful. On the way to Thrive Properties, I called Dr. Thomas, briefing him on the confrontation. Mary, don't go alone, he warned. Tony's dangerous. I brushed him off. This was my family's fight. At the office, it was quiet, just a lone receptionist typing. I asked for Tony, but she said he was out. Leave a message if you want, she said. Bored, I decided to wait at the cafe across the street, watching the office. Then my phone buzzed. Another text. Don't meet Tony. You'll regret it. I gripped the phone, feeling trapped in a game with no rules. As I prepared to leave the cafe, I saw Tony step out of the office, a briefcase in hand. Beside him wasn't Clara, it was James. What was my son doing with that man? And what would happen if I confronted them now? The smell of roasted coffee in the cafe across from Thrive Properties couldn't mask the chill creeping up my spine. Through the foggy glass, I watched James step out with Tony, my son's head bowed, hands in pockets, as if trying to shrink away from the towering man beside him. Tony clapped James's shoulder, a gesture both familiar and possessive, before they climbed into a black car and sped off down the alley. My heart thundered, not just from my cracked ribs, but from the sight my son, the boy I'd raised with my whole life, walking with a man I suspected was at the heart of our troubles. I sat frozen, clutching my husband's wedding ring, the only thing keeping me grounded. James had admitted to debts. But how much? To whom? And why was Tony involved? Was Clara pulling the strings? Or was James hiding something bigger? I called Dr. Thomas, my voice shaking. Tom, I just saw James with Tony. What do you know about him? He paused, then said grimly, Mary, Tony's not just in property. He's tied to loan sharks, and people who owe him don't get out easily. If James is in debt to him, this is serious. I returned home, my mind a tangle. Clara was in the kitchen, the smell of roast lamb filling the air. But the house felt like a storm was brewing. She glanced at me, her eyes probing. Mom, you look stressed. Where have you been? I didn't answer, sinking onto the sofa, still gripping my phone. I wanted to confront her about Tony, James, and the power of attorney. But I needed more proof to know who was friend or foe. That afternoon, I met Dr. Thomas at the hospital. He was reviewing my file, his face grave. Mary, I've got to be honest, your ribs weren't broken by a random punch. The force was deliberate, too strong for a drunken mistake. I froze, but before I could ask more, he continued. Yesterday, someone called my clinic, telling me not to share your condition. They threatened trouble if I didn't shut up. My blood ran cold. Was it Clara? I asked, my voice trembling. He shook his head. A man's voice. I reckon it's Tony. His words hit like a shockwave. If Tony was threatening my doctor, this was bigger than I'd imagined. I told him about the power of attorney and seeing James with Tony. He gripped my hand. Mary, protect yourself. If Claire and Tony are working together, James might just be a pawn. But you need solid proof before you act. I nodded, though I wanted to scream. James, my son. A pawn. He couldn't be. That evening, I arranged a family dinner, hoping to coax out answers. Clara laid out a spread fish pie, roast veg, garlic bread, but the mood was anything but warm. James stared at his plate, and Clara's smile was strained. Mom, how's the food? Learned this recipe from James's dad, she said, her voice too sweet. I looked her in the eye. Clara, tell me straight. What are you and Tony doing with the land? And why the power of attorney? The room went still. James stood, voice cracking. Mum, stop it. Why do you keep doubting Clara? Clara set her fork down, her eyes icy. Mum, I've told you we're protecting you. If you don't believe me, go ask Tony. Her words were a dare, but I saw James's hands shake. He knew something but wouldn't speak. The dinner ended in silence, our family like a shattered mirror. As I cleared the table, I found a scrap of paper under Clara's plate. It had Tony's number and a note, meet at the cafe, 9 p. And tomorrow, what's Clara planning? And if I show up, will I uncover the truth or walk into a trap? 3 weeks have passed since that tense family dinner, but the air in our St. George house remains heavy, as if no Bristol rain could wash it clean. I wake each day with an ache in my ribs, dulled by Dr. Thomas's pills, but the wound in my heart festers. The note with Tony's number and meet at the cafe, 9 p.m. Tomorrow sits in my pocket, a constant reminder that I'm at a crossroads. I haven't confronted Tony, not out of fear, but because I need to understand the full picture. Since that night, James has avoided me, leaving early and returning late, barely speaking. Clara keeps up her perfect act, cooking, cleaning, asking after me, but every word feels like a mask. Our family has changed forever. Gone are the evenings we'd share stories over dinner, reminiscing about James's dad. Now, there's only silence and sidelong glances. I decided to act. I called Mrs. Evans, though I still doubted her after seeing her with Tony. Mary, I'm sorry if I made you question me, she said, her voice heavy with regret. I was at Thrive Properties about my sister's land, nothing to do with Clara or Tony. Trust me, I wanted to, but kept my guard up. Do me a favor, I said. Find out what Tony and Clara are doing with my land. I need proof. She agreed, and I felt a flicker of hope. Though I feared I was trusting the wrong person, I also searched old papers at home, looking for anything tied to the Somerset land. I found a letter from my husband, handwritten, urging me to keep the land for James, so he always has a home, no matter how tough life gets. Tears fell as I read it. But the letter revealed something else. Part of the land was co-owned by my sister, Betty, who'd left Bristol years ago. If Clara and Tony wanted to sell, they'd need her signature. I called Betty, and she confirmed, Mary, I haven't signed anything. If someone's using my name, it's fraud. This was a breakthrough. I took it to Dr. Thomas, who was sorting files in his clinic, the air sharp with antiseptic. Mary, go to the police, he said firmly. Forging documents is illegal. If Clara and Tony are at it, they won't stop easily. I nodded, but my heart was torn. Going to the police could drag James into trouble, as his signature was on the contract. Could I save my son? Or would I push him into a corner? That evening, I sat James down, just the two of us. Clara was out, and I seized the chance to reach him. James, I've got proof, I said, placing his dad's letter and Betty's statement on the table. Clara and Tony are using fake papers to sell the land. Did you know? He looked at me, eyes welling. Mom, I didn't want to hurt you, Clara said. Selling the land would clear my debts. I owe Tony so much. I gripped his hand, my voice breaking. James, you're my son. I'll help you. But you have to tell me everything. How's Tony got you trapped? James took a shaky breath, then spilled it. He'd borrowed from Tony for a failed business venture. Tony demanded high interest, threatening our family if he didn't pay. Clara promised to handle it, but she was working with Tony for a cut. Mom, I messed up. I shouldn't have listened to her, he said, tears streaming. For the first time in weeks, I saw my boy again, but the relief was hollow. I knew the cost of this truth. Our family was broken, and none of us would escape unscathed. As James and I talked, Clara walked in, her eyes icy. Mom, James, what's this about? She asked, her voice sharp. She spotted the letter on the table, and her smile vanished. Mom, you shouldn't have done this, she said, her hand clenching. What happens now that Clara knows I have proof? And will James stand with me or stay under her control? The living room's dim bulb flickered, as if weary of the tension gripping our St. George home. Clara stood there, her gaze locked on the letter from James's dad on the table. Mom, you shouldn't have done this, she said, her voice sharp as a blade. I felt the ache in my ribs, but it was the sense that our family teetered on the edge that hurt more. James sat beside me, head bowed, hands trembling, unable to speak. The letter, with its heartfelt words, felt like an accusation binding the three of us. Clara, tell me the truth, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady despite my pounding heart. What's your plan with Tony? Forging papers, stealing my idea, making James sign contracts. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Clara didn't answer at once. She picked up the letter, running her fingers over it as if weighing its worth. Mom, you're wrong. I'm just trying to help James, to save this family. If you go to the police, James will take the fall, not me. Her words struck at my love for my son, but I saw her manipulation. James looked up, eyes red. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. Clara's right. If you make a fuss, I'll pay the price. I stared at him, feeling like I was facing a stranger, my boy, who once clung to me, now sided with the wife controlling him. But in his eyes, I saw pain, a struggle, and I knew he didn't fully want this. I tried to bridge the gap. Clara, James, I don't want our family to break. Tell me everything, and we can sort this out. I'll help you. James, with Tony's debt. But you have to be honest. Clara's lip curled in a half smile that chilled me. Mom, you think it's that simple. Tony's not someone you negotiate with. But James cut in, his voice shaking. Clara, stop. I want out. I don't want to lose Mom. His words were a flicker of light in the darkness. For the first time, I felt him pulling away from Clara's grip. But she wasn't letting go easily. She turned to him, her tone icy. You think you can just walk away. Tony won't let you, or your mom, off that easily. I grabbed James's hand, willing him strength. James, you're my son. I'll protect you, but you need to stand with me. He looked at me, then Clara, and I saw him waver. That night, I called my sister, Betty, to discuss the land. She agreed to come to Bristol to clear up the paperwork. Mary, if they forge my signature, I'll take them to court, she said, furious. I also contacted Mrs. Evans, despite my doubts, needing her help. She promised to keep digging into Tony and Thrive Properties, though I wasn't sure I could fully trust her. The next morning, I sat with James, just us. Clara was out, and I seized the moment. James, I'm not angry, but tell me everything. What's Tony holding over you? He took a deep breath and confessed Tony wasn't just a lender. He'd forced James to sign the land contract as collateral. Clara introduced James to Tony, promising to settle the debt. But she was working for Tony for a commission. Mom, I was wrong to trust her, James said. Tears falling, I hugged him, feeling my boy return, but knew this was only half the battle. Clara and Tony were still threats. As we spoke, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You and James need to stop. Tony knows everything. Before I could call back, the doorbell rang. Betty walked in, but with her were Mrs. Evans and Tony. Mary, we need to talk, Betty said, her voice grave. Is this a chance to clear things up, or have I walked into a trap? The doorbell's chime hit like a hammer, cutting through the fragile moment with James. I stood, clutching my husband's wedding ring in my pocket. My last anchor. Betty strode in, her face stern but eyes sharp, followed by Mrs. Evans and Tony, the man with the scarred chin I'd seen in the wedding photo and at the cafe. The air in our St. George house froze, the faint smell of stew only adding to the suffocation. James leapt up, face pale. Mum. Aunt Betty, what's going on? Mary, we need to set things straight, Betty said, her voice calm but commanding. She sat, gesturing for Tony and Mrs. Evans to do the same. Tony crossed his arms, his gaze sweeping over me and James like a predator sizing up prey. Mrs. Evans avoided my eyes, reminding me of the text, Mrs. Evans isn't your friend. Was I surrounded by betrayers? I spoke first, my voice firm despite the pain in my ribs. Tony, why are you here? Where's Clara? She's behind this, isn't she? Tony smirked, a chilling half smile. You've dug too deep. Old lady, Clara's just following my orders. As for James, he glanced at my son, his eyes sharp. He owes me a fortune. That Somerset land is his only way out. James's head dropped, hands clenched, silent. Betty cut in. Tony, you think you can forge my signature to sell that land? I checked with the council. It's still in my name and Mary's. You and Clara are breaking the law. Tony laughed, his voice rough. Aunt Betty, you think the police will care? James signed the contract. He'll be the one in cuffs if this goes public. I looked at James, my heart breaking. My son, raised with my blood and sweat, was cornered by his own mistakes. Mrs. Evans spoke up, her voice shaky. Mary, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get mixed up in this. Clara asked me to check on land deals, but I didn't know she was with Tony. I just wanted to help. I studied her, wanting to believe her, but after so many lies, I wasn't sure if you're genuine. Mrs. Evans, help me bring this to light, I said firmly. I turned to Tony. What do you want? Money, the land. If you touch James, I'll make sure you pay. He shrugged. Pay the debt or hand over the land. Simple as that. But I knew nothing was simple with someone like him. I looked at James, hoping he'd stand up, but he only muttered, Mum, I'm sorry. I don't know how to get out. That night, after Tony and Betty left, James and I sat in silence. Clara still hadn't returned, likely avoiding us. I held my husband's letter, reading his words. Keep the land for James, so he has a home. Had I honored that promise, I'd protected James. But at what cost? Our family was in pieces, none of us whole. The next morning, I went to the police with the letter, the forged contract, and Betty's statement. I knew it might implicate James, but I couldn't let Tony and Clara control him any longer. As I left the station, Bristol's rain poured down, as if cleansing the past. James called, his voice choked. Mum, I'll face the consequences. I don't want you carrying this anymore. Where does our family stand now? James is trying to rebuild, but Clara has vanished, leaving questions unanswered. The land remains, but it's no longer the home my husband envisioned. I clutched the wedding ring, wondering was the truth worth the cost? And if I could go back, would I choose differently? That answer, perhaps, will always be a mystery.